Jeffers. I'm a survivor. I'm an evacuee. I've been homeless. I've been an advocate, an organizer. I've been a caregiver. On August the 29th, I was at my godbrother's home, but I found myself being held captive after Katrina with no aid or any assistance. I was brought from my home there after helping rescue many persons to Mike's Hardware. And from there I was taken to 610, where I had to wait to be able to reach what you would call a state of survival. On 610, I faced a situation there and found myself going back into a mode of organizing, something I had not done since I was about 20 years old, and I was age 55. When I arrived on 610, there were about 250 people. When I awakened the next morning, it was over 1,500 people. State troopers would not allow us to get on buses. There was a very awesome state trooper, and I believe his name was Lieutenant Stanley. But he told me, he said, if you can help organize people into groups of 50, because we've been told we can't take anybody off these bridges unless they are in an orderly manner. And I, along with two other young ladies, ran up and down that interstate in order for us to get people in groups of 50. And when we were finally able to do that, there were about 32 buses that came up on 610, and when they came, we were able to get on those buses. I watched a lady die before me. I watched people pass out as a result of heat. There were so many inhumane things that happened, and there was so many inhumane things that happened before I got there. And going and rescuing people before I got to 610, I watch and still have nightmares of kids lying on their back and floating to the top. But there was just so much. Lady in a home that stood, and water was all the way up to here. But these are things that, that I still have to live with as I speak on this day. As we got on these buses, they didn't let me get on first. I got on the last bus. And as I got on that last bus, we all pulled off. They pulled off of 610. They never told us where we were going. They never told us what was going to happen to us. Only thing we knew is they told us we would not go to the Superdome and we would not go to the convention center. And that was all. So when we got on the bus that I was on, I asked the gentleman if we could please have prayer. On each bus you had state troopers that stood to the front of the buses with guns. While I was on 610, I have a mark right here where I was pressed with a shotgun, whatever the rifles and stuff, because I got too close to the state troopers. In order for me not to come close, and they had fear because there were more people than there were troopers. But we got on these buses. We had prayer. I asked for prayer. We had prayer, and then I took my seat. Finding out, as I sat on this bus, you had people of all walks of life. They were not people that just lived in public housing. We had nurses on there. We had lawyers. I sat by this lady and I asked her why didn't she leave. And she said because she did not know what mandatory meant. And then I spoke to some others that were on the bus, and they told me they had cars and they watched their cars go down. Why? Because they were in New Orleans, people are 10 to 20 generations deep. And a lot of them had never been past the Esplanade Mall. So they didn't know where to go because all their family was right here. So I understood why there were so many people that were still here, because they didn't know where to go or what to do. The bus that I was on, we all started in the same direction, went across the, Lake Pontchartrain, and we had state troopers that rode side by side on each of them. And then eventually, after we got across Lake Pontchartrain, then I don't mean Lake Pontchartrain, going toward Baton Rouge, they began to just disperse. And all of our buses, we ended up going into Houston, but only 2 of them stopped. and I was placed into the Astrodome with over 22,000 people. And being in the Astrodome with those 22,000 people, that was our new community. There was 2 days before I ever spoke, because the only thing we had mega police and troopers and sheriffs that just patrolled the entire Astrodome. You got to know people, and I lived on the first street. I slept, and we called them streets. We had neighbors and the people that slept by us across from us. But nobody ever said anything as to what was going to happen to us. And that was always my greatest fear. What are they going to do with us now? After about 2 days, with many entertainers and people like Hillary Clinton, Oprah Winfrey, Jamie Foxx, you name them, they came through there. And they came through in an entourage, you know, like, hey, you know, I mean, but they were coming, but they were offering nothing. There was no encouragement. To me, it was just come in, I guess, just to say hi. But they had this group of organizers, that Mayor White, who was the mayor at that time, that he had asked to come in the dome. And they asked for people to come in order, if they wanted to have a voice on that day. And it was on a Monday, and it had to be like September 1st, 2nd. It was either the 3rd or 4th of September. I stayed in New Orleans for 5 days before I was rescued and brought out of New Orleans, and the hurricane was on August the 29th. The only reason I was still there was because I was a caregiver, and by the time I got to leave, was just too tired to leave. But being in the dome, we went upstairs, and there was about 80 people out of over 22,000 people that were there that went. And they asked us, what do you want to, you know, what do you want to see happen here? And out of those 80 people, there were about 4 or 5 that began to start talking, and I was one of those persons, because I found myself in the Astrodome with a lot of parents that were very young parents that now no longer had their mothers as support, or their aunties, or the lady across the street. So now they had 4 or 5 kids that surrounded them, you know, even infants. And my thing was, you know, well, we asked in leading this if we could get some type of play area or a daycare. And that was the first thing that we wanted. In addition to that, the group said, okay, we're going to make sure that happens. That was a metropolitan organization, which is TMO, which is a part of the Industrial Area Foundation. But they made sure that we were able